What if a single birth certificate from 1889 had never existed? What if Clara Hitler had never given birth to her fourth child in that small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn? The absence of one person, even a baby, can change the course of history in ways that ripple across centuries. I suppose you could say this is one episode of Imagine If, where we don't need to imagine very hard to see how much better things could have been. In this episode of Imagine If, we're going to tackle the most fascinating questions about a Hitlerless 20th century. Would someone else have risen to lead Nazi Germany? Would World War II have happened at all? Would the Holocaust have been prevented? Would the Soviet Union have become a superpower? And perhaps most intriguingly, would the world we live in today be more peaceful? Or would other forms of extremism have filled the void? The Weimar Republic of the 1920s and 1930s was a pressure cooker of political tension, economic hardship, and wounded national pride. The harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles had left Germany humiliated and financially crippled. Hyperinflation had wiped out middle-class savings. Communist revolutionaries clashed with right-wing nationalists in the streets. It was a perfect storm waiting for someone to harness its energy. But without Hitler's unique combination of charismatic extremism and organizational skill, that storm might have taken a very different course. Without Hitler, other political figures might have emerged as dominant forces in German politics. Perhaps Franz von Papen or Kurt von Schleicher would have established more traditional authoritarian governments, similar to other European nations of the time. Though, let's be honest, with names like von Papen and von Schleicher, they sound more like characters from a Victorian novel than potential dictators. These leaders, while nationalist and conservative, would likely have lacked Hitler's genocidal ambitions and extreme racial ideologies. The Communist Party might have gained more support among working-class Germans, potentially leading to increased political tension between left and right. However, the German military establishment and industrial elite would likely have prevented a communist takeover, instead backing a more conventional conservative government. The absence of Hitler would not necessarily have prevented a European war in the 1930s or 1940s. The underlying tensions from World War I, colonial rivalries, and competing national interests would have remained. However, any conflict would likely have been more limited in scope and ambition. After all, most other European leaders of the time managed to get through their days without trying to conquer the continent. It's really not that hard. Hit subscribe to explore more fascinating alternate histories and share your thoughts in the comments. What historical figure would you erase from time? A non-Hitler Germany might have sought to revise the Treaty of Versailles through diplomatic means or limited military actions, similar to how Mussolini's Italy operated. The systematic rearmament of Germany might have proceeded more slowly, giving other European powers more time to respond and potentially negotiate. Perhaps the most significant difference would have been the fate of European Jews. While anti-Semitism was widespread in Europe, without Hitler's systematic implementation of the final solution, the Jewish communities would have largely survived. They would have continued contributing to European culture, science, and society, though they might still have faced discrimination and periodic persecution. The absence of the Holocaust would have preserved millions of lives and countless contributions to human knowledge and culture. The demographics of modern Europe, Israel, and the United States would be profoundly different. Without Hitler, the entire course of the 20th century would have been altered. The Soviet Union might not have expanded as far westward without the power vacuum created by Nazi Germany's defeat. The United States might have remained more isolationist without the clear moral imperative to intervene in European affairs. And high school history teachers would have had to find something else to talk about for half the semester. The development of nuclear weapons might have been delayed or taken a different path without the urgency of World War II. The scientific exodus from Nazi Germany wouldn't have occurred, potentially keeping more scientific talent in Europe rather than concentrating it in the United States. The absence of Hitler would have changed our modern political discourse and cultural reference points. Without the extreme example of Nazi Germany, our understanding of political extremism, genocide, and totalitarianism would be different, and internet arguments would have had to find a different go-to comparison for bad behavior. Perhaps "you're being such a King John" would have become the standard. The clear moral lessons of World War II, which have shaped international law, human rights conventions, and political philosophy, might have evolved more gradually or taken different forms. However, this shouldn't lead us to conclude that Hitler was somehow necessary for humanity to learn these lessons. Rather, it reminds us that historical events are not inevitable, and individual actors can have profound effects on the course of history, for better or worse. This historical thought experiment reminds us that while broader historical forces shape the possibilities of any era, individual leaders and their choices matter enormously. The absence of one person, even one as influential as Hitler, wouldn't have solved all of Europe's problems or prevented all conflicts. However, it might have allowed for more moderate solutions and prevented the worst atrocities of the 20th century. And perhaps the toothbrush mustache would still be considered a perfectly acceptable facial hair choice today. Understanding this helps us recognize the importance of opposing extremism and supporting democratic institutions before they can be undermined by radical forces. It also reminds us that alternative paths are always possible and that the choices we make today can have profound implications for future generations.